All right, some quick workout thoughts this morning that are really important, really important. Um, okay, just to preface this, so what I'm doing here is I'm flicking ideas at you. So under the law of Moses, a priest would use hyssop, which was like a plant, a branch, um, and they dip it in water and oil and blood. That was all prescribed how that was prepared, and they'd flick it at things to sanctify them. So sanctify is to make something better. And that's what I'm doing with just flicking some ideas at you with these videos and with the blog posts. I'm doing this. I've used the analogy of crumbs off the table. Um, these ideas, they don't replace what's in the books. It's just that I write. It's just like I am so busy. I don't have a free minute because every free minute, like my days are broken into blocks, and today's Saturday. I got up really early. It's about 6 o'clock now in the morning. I'll probably write until um, 2, maybe, and then I'll go do some farm work on the property I live on with my kids. I have a little hobby farm. We're in the midst of tons of things. It's really busy. There's always a ton to do, and we have these blocks of time, and we prioritize everything during the blocks. And then usually Saturday afternoons and Sunday afternoons, I try to spend a couple hours with my kids, maybe 2 hours, um, and my wife, and we have some quality time. Weekdays aren't much better. I get up super early. I do the book thing for hours and hours, and then I have to go work my full-time job all day, and then I have dinner, come home, well, have dinner and spend home time with my family for an hour or an hour and a half, and then spend time. So these videos, my point with this is like, why I'm in a hoodie, like I'm not dressed up. This isn't a fancy video, whatever. It's like every moment I can catch that I can siphon off. That's not the right word. Partition off something coherent that that isn't uh, that is not overly harmed by the fact that it's not being given a full legal case in the books. I make a video, so that's really important. Now, maybe I should separate that out as a video, say like how to understand what it is I'm doing and why it is the way it is. But anyway, so I caught this video. I listen to videos sometimes when I'm working, and caught this video by uh, this Tim Pool guy, and let's see how to approach this. So before we get to that, here's the idea, folks. We live in the time of the Great Division, long prophesied, and to try to just flick at you some little bullets about what this is like, so you can start to open your eyes about it and sense what's going on and what will be in greater clarity, and prepare your heart for it, mostly by repenting and becoming better. Um, Here's just some thoughts, hard and fast. The um, Okay, let's start with the righteous and the wicked. When you say righteous or wicked, like we're not talking about categories. You can use that as a category, but breaking things into two pieces, that's not a very precise breaking, because like let's look at the category of righteous. Whatever your line is on the end, let's see, this is reversed because of the mirroring of the camera. Whatever your line is on the end, um, where wickedness begins, there's a huge gap between that and the top of righteousness, which is God Himself, right? And on the wicked side, you could say the same thing. I just had a quick conversation with someone yesterday where I threw out the idea that you can't really know evil until you know love, and you can't see evil beyond the degree of love that's been expressed and turned away from. So, what you think of as evil, if you think like, uh, well, I don't want to get into particulars there because that's a rabbit hole. But like, think of what people did to Jesus um, in the face of the demonstration he provided of love. That's pretty evil, right? And so if you think of something like shoving down an old person in the street, that happens sometimes these days, um, that is pretty bad, right? So, but you can compare and contrast these, and there's a huge difference between, saying something offensive versus crucifying the Lord. Um, anyway, so to treat these things categorically, like there's two buckets and you're in one or the other, it's very low resolution. It's not bad, but it's very low resolution. So it's better to think of these things in terms of gradients, the gradient of good and the gradient of evil, and they meet in the middle. And yeah, so, well, they don't meet in the middle. It's actually, I could draw a picture. It's like two wedges. So if you take a rectangle and you draw a line from one corner to the other, and you just pull them apart a little, it's a gradient. And one increases as the other decreases. And so you've heard the line from Solzhenitsyn that says that the line between good and evil crosses through the heart of every man. That's paraphrased, but that's true, right? And there's this mix, and that mix is really important. Anyway, so wicked people, again, I've made it clear, there's a gradient, right? So now I'm going to talk categorically, which is necessarily low resolution. But don't think that there's this magical separation and people are all one or all the other. That's extraordinarily rare. It's possible. So in the last days, a wedge drives people to the extremes, but they're not there yet. So this video that I'm going to put a link in, and I think you should go watch it. It's interesting because, one, it's yet another example of how commonplace discussions are becoming about civil war and secession. But it's also a good illustration of the principle of what happens during this great divide. It's not a categorical division of a line right down the center. I've talked many times about, and written many times about, how it's foolish to consider that what's to come, particularly in the United States, but this will be a global phenomenon, is going to be something like a north-south divide, because ideologically and geographically we're so mixed up that that's not going to happen. It's very much a house-to-house kind of thing, even within houses. And there's scriptures that back that idea. Here are some ideas that I just want to throw out for consideration. The first idea is this is all from recollection. I don't have notes, so bear with me. The first idea is the fact that the wicked, you'd think that they'd be real happy getting rid of the righteous because they don't like them around. But here's the thing. You have to think about why they don't like them. Wicked people don't like righteous people because, well, it's in line with everything else they do. They do what they do to feel good about who they are while knowing that they're not good people. So that definition or description is really important because it correctly characterizes people as wicked who would absolutely not consider themselves wicked and who might not look wicked from the outside to those who are low information people. So people who want to feel good and they dissociate that from actually being good, those are dangerous people. They're dangerous people. So overtly wicked people, people who do what's wrong knowing it's wrong, and they don't hide the fact that it's wrong. They're very okay with people knowing that they do things that are bad. Those people are far less dangerous. This is like if I gave you the choice between meeting a vicious dog who was calm and gave no warning, or one that barks all the time. Which one would you, before it bites you, which one would you prefer to come across? And so the quiet dogs are the dangerous ones. The barking ones you can prepare for and avoid. So wicked people, they don't want righteous people around, in one sense, because of the way that they make them feel. And this is because with how a righteous person is, oh, this is deep stuff. This is important though. So a person's conscience is inside of them, but it's externally influenced. So it's not just you who controls the volume on that by what you choose, although you do, and that is by far the strongest influence. But the problem is that when someone comes around you, that also influences your conscience. The people you're around have an effect on that. And I don't want to talk about the influence of evil people in that regard, but let's talk about righteous people. The very presence of a righteous person will increase the intensity of your conscience. So it'll crank up the volume. That person doesn't even have to say anything. And so this is why even babies react differently in the presence of people who have lots of light. So that's a crazy thing. But if you've seen it, you know what I mean. So animals do too. Animals do too. I don't want to get into this, but there's a reason that the animals came to Noah. And that wasn't so much, I mean, it is a miracle because it consists of principles that aren't generally known. But it is a natural law, is throwing up a ball and having it fall back down. That's all I'll say about that for now. But just realize that these are fields of influence, okay? A righteous person doesn't have to say anything to magnify the light inside someone. So if you've turned that knob way down through willful disobedience, and a righteous person comes around you, it is an extremely strong judgment on your heart. Because if you have an affinity for that person, I'm not saying in any kind of like sexual attraction kind of way. I mean, in the purest sense, an affinity, like you want to be around that person because the light is brighter. Like go read John 3. And this is why Jesus could divide a crowd just by standing there. Because some people, few, would want to be closer to him because of the light inside of him. I'm not saying this is a conscious thing. But most of the time it's not. Like you have to have a certain level of understanding and experience to recognize this explicitly. But you just feel drawn to people who have greater light if your heart is good. And again, gradient. I'm speaking categorically, but in fact, these things are continuous. It's a gradient. So when the righteous are around the wicked are very uncomfortable because they've managed through their choices to reduce the volume of their conscience, the voice of God within them. But when a righteous person comes around, boom, without they don't have a choice, that signal will be amplified. And it's amplified for the sake of the righteous person and through the instrumentality of the righteous person. This is why when the mighty angel visited Daniel in the book of Daniel, chapter 10, Daniel collapsed. He didn't collapse before because that light wasn't inside of him. But when that mighty angel appeared, that influence, that field was of glory, was stronger, and it exceeded his capacity to withstand it, and he was overcome. Or when in the book of Revelation, when John's visited, he falls down as if dead. So anyway, so that much glory is a really rare thing to find someone with that much glory. And also our bodies are like a lead shield to radiation. That's what our bodies are to the glory of God. So anyway, I don't want to go, I'm kind of going off the deep end with this. I want to rein it in a little bit. So you'd think that wicked people would be very glad to see righteous people leave because it really irritates them. It really makes them feel bad about themselves. But you have to understand what they're after is how they feel. And yes, you being around them, what it's like is a mirror. It's like they're very, very ugly and they don't want to recognize that they're very, very ugly. And they wear lots of makeup or wear a disguise. But when you come around, it's like a mirror, right? It's like a mirror. And they don't want to see that. So they don't want you around. But at the same time, that's not the only mirror. And this is my point I wanted to make with all this, although everything I said is really important and it has a lot of implications. But they, if you leave them or they get rid of you, and it's really obvious that the reason they did that was because you're better than them, that is an even worse mirror. Does that make sense? It's even worse than having you around. Getting rid of you because you're righteous is even worse than having you around. Because it's too overt. It's too much of an outward admission and plainness of why they're doing what they're doing and who they are on the inside. This is why when people persecute you, they always come up with rubbish reasons to do it. This is why when people leave you, so Jesus said, wilt thou also leave me, to his disciples? And they said, where are we going to go? You have the words of eternal life. Because people were leaving him left and right. At one point, he had thousands of people following him, and then it went away to nothing, literally, at the end. So when people leave you, they're not going to say, so it says, the New Testament says that after the loaves and fishes, he had this huge following because people want free food, right? Who doesn't? But he wanted to give them the tree, not the fruit, not just the fruit. He wanted to give them the tree. And the tree wasn't so glamorous to these people because of where their hearts were. This is, we don't want to repent. Are you nuts? Like, just give us bread and fish. That's what we're in it for, which is exactly where most Christians are today. That's what they want. But anyway, he said, no. You have to live like I do. You have to eat my flesh and drink my blood. You have to actually live the teachings I'm giving you, and you actually have to be like I am in character. I just revealed a mystery to you. I'll speak more about it later. So, incidentally, when I throw things out there like that, and I do this in my books too, but to a lesser extent, so there's always a place where I'm going to explain this in full. But when I throw it out in little emissions like that, for those who have ears to hear, it's a permission slip that I can say things that aren't ready to be revealed yet in full, because it takes faith to notice them and to dig in and decide for yourself. So it's not incidental that I do those things. A lot of what I do is much more intentional than it seems. Anyway, and so it is with everyone who's a servant of God, to the extent that they are. Jesus wanted people to be like he was, but all they wanted were the fruits of how he was. So they were, just like the Israelites were with Moses, they were very content with Moses just being the vehicle of delivering to them what he had paid for, as far as that can be done, because it's not a one-for-one. There's very much a reduction. But anyway, so these wicked people, yes, they want you to go away, but they need to get rid of you in a way that doesn't make them feel worse about themselves than they already do. So they want to, this is the way Satan is too, and all of his followers, human or otherwise, they want to maintain their self-image, which is an illusion. And so that's the reason for a lot of what they do. And you have to learn the strategy to be able to work around it, we'll say, to the best extent. So when you watch this video, I'm going to link, which I highly recommend. What they're discussing is some counties seceding from the state of Oregon. And there have been similar movements, which I don't think a lot of people know about, but these are legit things that legislatures, representatives and state legislatures have pursued and voted on. And here's the thing, and why. So they say, like, what's the big deal if, like, the state of Washington, for example, a whole lot of the population's in Seattle, and most of the state disagrees with their ideologies. So why not just split up the state? And the reason most people come back with is because they don't want to lose the tax revenue. I think there's some merit to that idea. But the bigger idea that no one's talking about, and they're not going to because they don't have the basis to understand it, is what I just explained. Those people will not let those counties go, not just because they want the money, and they do. And also, in that case, it's not like having a righteous person around you, because those people aren't around them. And they have no voice because the legislative majority agrees with the ideologies of the cities. So it's not really a burr in their side to keep those people around. They get all the benefit of the money without the cost of having organized arguments that demonstrate how foolish their ideas are, we'll say. So they don't have to deal with that, so it's not too much of a thorn in their side, and they get the money. But the bigger problem is, if they let those people go, what does that say about them? Do you get what I'm saying? It's a really important idea. So in the last days, the division is not just a division. Here are some analogies to help you think about the sorts of things that will happen and what it'll look like. So you ever watch water droplets on a window? And they coalesce because the droplets have an affinity for each other. It's electromagnetic. They actually draw each other in. Especially so if it's on a vertical window, like, I guess there's not a whole lot of glass laying flat. But if you're looking out the window of a car or something, you'll see the force of gravity. Maybe the wind blowing on it will contribute to these things. But as they move, they get drawn together. There's a coalescing. So the coalescing will happen, but there's also a splitting that happens. And the splitting is not like a cell splitting, which is growth and life. It's more like cancer that's cut out. And depending on what someone thinks and feels, they'll see certain things as cancerous or not. And different people will see the same thing as healthy or cancer, right, in this analogy. But there will be cutting. But that cutting is not going to look the same, because righteous people are going to want to break free from wicked people, because they're going to want to live according to the dictates of their conscience, and they can't do that when they're in a compelled state of being. So you'll see this with employment. You'll see this with education. You'll see this with where people live, and on and on. But the opposite way, so that's where that cutting will happen, and also they'll be cast out. And they are being cast out. The other way this happens from the perspective of the wicked is the wicked will cast out the righteous, but there will be other ways of division as well, because, like I said, it's not so simple as them wanting to be separate. That's not the driving catalyst. The catalyst for everything they do is to feel good while being evil. That's their modus operandi. The motive of the devil is to maximize misery, but the people who follow him, their motive is to feel good in spite of being evil. So that's a long enough rant, but I've splashed you with some things that are highly valuable, so I hope you contemplate those, think about them, and watch this video, and inform yourself about what is coming, because it's already here.